And welcome to the Barry Foster Show on YouTube, originating from the Ridge Flora Studios in the City of Charm, beautiful downtown Avon Park. I'd like to remind you that if you have any thoughts, ideas, or suggestions for our program, drop us a line at thebarryfostershow@gmail.com or just put some comments right below here. Each weekday on the YouTube page, we'll try to be having new programming on a regular basis. And if you would subscribe to our YouTube page and join our pages at the Barry Foster Show on Facebook and Instagram, that would be quite helpful. In these studios, again, the handsome and exciting John Larsen. Good morning, John.
Good morning.
Things over the weekend and into the week have been moving very, very quickly. There have been a number of local salutes to Charlie Kirk. They had one at the Highlands County Courthouse, one in Sebring, one in Avon Park. Wednesday night, there's going to be one up in Frostproof, the Friendly City at Lake Clinch Park. They're going to have there. And sadly, there will be Wednesday night, which is church night for us. We would love to go, but we can't go because it's church night for us. But it has been at different baseball stadiums, football stadiums, and as you pointed out yesterday, some of the walk-ups have been a little bit bland, but the fact that they did it at all. And in fact, here in Highlands County, I saw an electronic billboard with a quote by Charlie Kirk.
Really?
And yeah, and Charlie Kirk, one of his quotes was, "Because when society stops talking, violence follows." And his idea was to talk, to open the idea of free expression, and that's what colleges used to be all about. I'll never forget when I went to school. One of the teaching halls that they had the classrooms in, it had a quote. I think it was Socrates, and it said, "Question authority," and you were supposed to always be asking questions, and you should always be looking to learn new things. And our pastor on Sunday brought up the idea of debate, saying, you and I may debate something, and I'm probably not going to change your mind, and you're probably not going to change my mind, but the people watching may be swayed one way or the other, weighing the merits of an argument, or even take that debate to another level where they find somebody in the crowd that disagreed with them or did agree with them. But the idea was the marketplace of free ideas.
Well, the thing that I know, you're not supposed to take pleasure in somebody else's misery. However, I watched a number of videos this weekend and it was mostly younger white women, mostly, not all, but mostly, who just went on and YouTube, you name it, whatever form, social media form, and they just said the most vile things. And some of these were professionals. Teachers, high school teachers, college teachers, nurses, doctors, made these vile comments. And guess what? Their employer had the courage to say, "We don't need you anymore. You're done." And to watch the videos when they got that news, oh, brother.
The wailing and gnashing of teeth.
Oh, my gosh, yes, absolutely. But, I mean, once you post something on the internet, okay, there was a fella there, watched. He worked 6 years, I think it was for IBM, and he had made some vile postings. We got fired. And he came on initially, and he was angry that he got fired. He was angry at IBM. What he had tried to do, he tried to take it down as soon as he figured he made a mistake. Unfortunately, some people that may not be his friends made sure that IBM or somebody at IBM got a hold of that, and it took him out. And at the end, he was literally crying. But he was angry in the beginning.
Oh, sure.
But he knew at the end that, a lot of times you cry when you make a mistake, okay? And I think he realized he made a huge, huge mistake, and it cost him dearly.
Yeah, nothing on the internet goes away.
No.
And we've heard that from Kash Patel now, that as they begin to unravel what happened with this shooter, and I think there's a lot more to come on this. But as they begin to unravel this, things that they thought they had scrubbed don't stay scrubbed. And in fact, there's a group now that is looking for anybody who's posted anything, and they want you to funnel it to their page. And this one guy goes, "Well, where was this during George Floyd?" I said, "Well, you didn't start it. If you want something done, you got to do it." And they have gone and done it.
One story I saw yesterday was Scott Pressler, who is the fellow that went around before the last election and recruited people like the Amish community and many, many others in Pennsylvania specifically to vote. And I'll tell you the other thing. I heard Victor Davis Hanson say this weekend. He said, in memory of Charlie Kirk, he said, the biggest thing you could do in his memory would be to make sure you vote at the midterms.
Amen.
He said, we have to retain control, otherwise this country will go further into despair because of what the Democrats will try to do to Trump.
Well, I saw Jesse Waters' program where now they allege, and I haven't seen this, but the Democrats are now trying to make a blue MAGA, that they are trying to distance themselves from the radical wing of the party. But I think I think the stain is on them. You know, this is what happened to Charlie Kirk is the culmination of the drumbeat of calling people Nazis, of calling people fascists, saying, "Oh, look, if you could go back in time and take out baby Hitler, wouldn't you do it? Wouldn't you take out baby Hitler?" And there have been surveys where a majority of some of these people have said, well, it would be somewhat justified if you took some of these people out, if you took them out, because they're so afraid of the ideas, you know. And here you had Charlie Kirk, who went on to college campuses, engaged in pleasant debate. He let these guys kind of paint themselves into a corner. I saw one, and again, the internet is now littered with these clips. This one guy came up supposedly dressed in garb that he was supposed to be Jesus, and he in fact called himself Jesus Christ, Jesus H. Christ. And Charlie said, well, when this happened, what did you tell the Sadducees? And he didn't know. Mm-hmm. And he says, well, what's the word, the Aramaic word for father? He says, well, you don't make a very good Jesus. You know, and they were laughing. And what had happened is Charlie Kirk had given the conservative kids a place to go. Turning Point gave them a place to gather, that they weren't alone, okay? And that was growing. He was changing hearts and minds. And some of these other kids that disagreed with him so virulently, he was always nice. And these three girls were talking to him about abortion, and they said, he says, you want to kill your baby? Well, it's not a baby. He said, well, what is it? He says, it's a clump of cells. He goes, well, you're a clump of cells. I'm a clump of cells. And her eyes got real big, like, holy crow. You know, and he was making them think. But these other people, in order to get what Stalin used to call the useful idiots, to do their bidding, would continue. And this was in the media as well, calling people fascists, calling people Nazis, dehumanizing them so that they could be an easy target, you know. And it's good for the authoritarian administration because they continue to consolidate their power. They continue to use this kind of language, and we all know that what the idea is to take over the language. Hateful thoughts lead to hateful words, which leads to hateful action. Okay, this is what an attempted takeover looks like through the administration. I mean, the tyranny begins with the redefinition of language, and we've talked about this before.
Oh yeah, and I think there's it's very ironic that I listened to one of the higher up Democratic mucky-mucks this morning, and they had played a clip just before they brought him on. They played a clip of Jasmine Crockett and her vile racism rants that she makes all the time. And then they asked this Democrat mucky-muck when he came on, they said, what do you think of that? He said, I wish she would shut her mouth.
Oh, they're backtracking.
Because they know that now, especially now, all of that comment and that type of talk is incendiary. They know that. And somehow they're trying to shut it down. But people like her, Rashida Tlaib, the rest of them, they can't shut it down because they have no other thing to say except that. So this is where they're at. Now,
and I've seen this little clip of AOC and some of these other ones calling for unity. Oh, we have to have unity now. We can't have this divisive kind of language, which is code for please forgive us. Mm-hmm. Please forgive us and say it's all right what we did, and we promise we won't do it again. I don't believe them, okay? But that the calls from unity are the people who are the most guilty of it.
Oh, absolutely.
You
absolutely.
know? Yeah. And it's up to us. It's up to us to begin the pushback. And how do we do it? Okay, it's very simple. You tell the truth, you learn to defend, you build parallel spaces, and you push back. Okay? So in other words, when you speak, you don't lie about people. You have to have the receipts. You have to say, here's the video. I can show you the video where she said this, just like they did on TV. And you have to learn to defend. And I would say, when Charlie Kirk was asked how he wanted to be, this interviewer, this kid said, if everything goes away, how do you want to be remembered? And Kirk goes, if I die? He goes, if everything goes away. And he says, I want to be remembered for my faith. So we have to base everything we do on our faith. And I would say the vast bulk of people who are listening to this podcast right now are Christians. So we have to learn to respond in a Christian manner. Sometimes that means, I love this, speaking the truth in love. You know, you don't hate the person, but you cannot let them get away with what they're getting away with. So we have to tell the truth, learn to defend our faith, learn to defend the Constitution, and build parallel spaces, which is places like Turning Point, places like the Tea Party, where we can go, where we are among like-minded individuals who are looking to preserve the republic, and then we need to push back. We need to say, I am not going to accept your definition of this word. I am not going to accept that idea. You may think that you're a cat. You may identify as a cat, but I don't have to call you a cat. You may be some 40-year-old guy who's put on a dress and thinks you're a woman, but everybody here knows you're no woman, okay? All right? Most women don't have... Used to be, you'd go to the carnival to see the bearded lady, okay? Mm-hmm. You didn't see that very often, okay? So you have to learn to push back and say, all right, you want to believe that, you go ahead, but I'm not going to play that game.
Well, I did just see on here that Marco Rubio, okay, the State Department, yanks more than 6,000 student visas due to assault, burglary, and support of terrorism.
Good.
So finally, and you know, here's the thing I don't understand. I can't understand this, but Trump said last week, I think it was, that he was okay with bringing some inordinate large number of Chinese students to this country to go to school. And I'm saying, why? Why? The belly of the beast, our number one enemy, and we're going to invite more, because also, here's the other thing that Victor Davis Hanson talked about last week. He watched the military parade that they just had in China.
Oh, yes,
okay,
I saw that.
Huge military parade.
Yes.
And also, and he looked into, and he knows an enormous amount about war and all of that, and battles that took place over centuries and so on. But he said, if you look at their big, you know, like the new bomber that we've got, okay, the thing that supposedly you can't see on radar.
The stealth.
The the Chinese model, exactly the same way. If you look at the aircraft carriers they're building today, like what we've got, exactly the same as ours. If you look at the tanks that they're building today, exactly the same as ours. Where did all this come from? They have stolen those items and those ideas and so on. And how did they get it? Because, you know, and this has been reported because they've said it themselves, a lot of the Chinese students in this country that are going to college, if you will, know and have said, we have to report back to the home country, okay, on a regular basis as to what we saw, what we learned, and who we learned it from.
Well,
so
you set a thief to catch a thief. You set a thief to catch a thief. And I remember in the movie The Longest Day, the Germans were in their compound where they were planning their war strategy, and all of a sudden there's a half a dozen GIs come in, and the guy sticks a bayonet up to the belly of this general. Goes, I got another crowd here, and they're talking just like they're Americans. All of a sudden, the one guy goes, Achtung! And they stop and they stand up. And he says, "These are our spies." He says, "What's the name of the Brooklyn baseball team?" He says, "The Dodgers," and he rattles off the starting lineup. He says, "These are our people who have come back from America to help defend the fatherland." And they spoke fluent German, but they spoke fluent English just like you and me. They could have been a guy that you met down at Moe's Bar and had a beer with, okay? I say that because they could have counter spies finding out who these Chinese are that are doing these things and to ferret them out. Is that what they're doing? I have no idea.
Right.
But I can see, and we've seen on many occasions Trump say things to get a feel for what the deal's going to be. When Trump comes out with an outrageous statement, you always, it's like when the new computer or the new iPhone comes out, you wait until they work the bugs out. Mm-hmm. So when Trump says that stuff, I go, well, let's see what's going to happen there.
Right. And that was true in the automotive industry, too. We always said, because we were a big supplier to the automotive industries, when a new model came out, don't buy one for the first 6 months.
No.
Because there's all kinds. I mean, you can see today where recalls occur on vehicles that have been out on the market for 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. So if you buy a vehicle that was made and you bought one of the number 100 off the assembly line, guess what? You were probably going to have a lot of lemons to deal with in that vehicle, because they're not only just the parts themselves may have some bugs, but it's the assembly of the parts and the installation of the parts that could create an issue. So that's why we always said, never buy a car made on Monday, because Monday a lot of people came to work maybe feeling good after the weekend.
Little tired from a weekend bender.
Or never buy a car that is brand new, first ones off the lot when they started building the new model. So that was just something you learned about the industry very quickly, and so on. So yes.
Well, you hear Trump say these kinds of things, and sometimes I wonder if they're trying to get reactions from certain people to see where they stand.
Which way the wind's blowing?
Which way the wind's blowing.
Yep, that very well could be, because it's, it's just, but it is obvious now, and again, I don't want to mention his name all the time, but Victor Davis Hanson teaches at a college out in California. He also does a lot of things with Hillsdale College. He has the heartbeat of what goes on in the college systems around this country. And he himself has said many, many times that we bring way too many, not only Chinese, but also Arabic country students into this country, because they funnel so much money, and the colleges charge them a full ride. In other words, let's say your admission is $50,000 a year, maybe even more, all right? But maybe the home students get it for $30,000 or $25,000. Right. So they love it that you come in and pay $50,000 for your child to come here, even though they may come from our number one enemy's country, and so on. So that's the whole thing with colleges today. It's all about the money. All about the money. And
that's why they did not like Charlie Kirk, because one of his plotters was college was a scam.
Yes.
And he went in there and he talked about how he was self-educated. All right, and one guy he was in economics, and Kirk starts naming off all these economists. And have you heard of him? Well, I heard of him. Are they teaching him? No. And anyway, Thomas Sowell. Well, I bought Thomas Sowell's book, and he said, well, that's why you're getting an indoctrination and not an education, because you're not getting a balanced view of the way things are.
Right.
And he said college is a scam, and that's why we wanted to see that's why they wanted to see free college education, to put them in an indoctrination center.
Yes.
Because kids were taught to hate their country.
Yes.
And they were taught to hate their countries, taught to hate our history. And we all know, he who controls the past controls the future, and he who controls the present controls the past. Okay, so they were taught to hate America. Okay, and they were taught to hate the United States. And as Charlie now was getting people to and we've talked about how we need more tradesmen than art history majors anyway. And this is the future of our country. So they did not like Charlie because Charlie was anti-college, if you will.
And it's amazing that a lot of colleges invited him to come, even in spite of his outward disdain for going to college and spending time, energy, and money to do that, and then come out indoctrinated, not educated. So it was amazing that these colleges would allow him to come on and speak about those things, even though it was counter to what they were trying to do, which was to get more students in and create more money.
Well, it's interesting to know how many people invited him and how many people allowed him. Like several years ago, Steven Crowder came and appeared at South Florida State College. At the time it was the South Florida Community College. But at any rate, he spoke, but they didn't invite him, okay? There were no protests. This is a pretty conservative area.
Yes.
And our college students are a lot older than the general college students. This is not this is a commuter college. But at any rate, it's interesting to hear him, who came and spoke and fielded a few questions, but they were mostly very friendly,
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting, too. The other thing that a number of people said this weekend that follow this kind of stuff said that one thing you cannot do, you cannot run, you cannot hide, you cannot cower in spite of what happened to Charlie Kirk. In other words, their goal, these people that are on the opposite side of that, wanted to do nothing but shut you down, keep you from speaking, keeping you from expressing your views, and so on. So that's the one thing that we cannot allow happen. You have to continue to speak up. You have to continue to express your opinion. Whether it's right or wrong, you have a right in this country to express your opinion.
Well, there have been incidences where people like Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh and other conservative pundits and podcasters, they have gotten them out, well, you're going to be next. And he said, well, don't worry, if I'm next, there's somebody who will take our place. And one thing that Erica Kirk has said, that Charlie was good at grooming people to come after him. So I'll be interested to see who rises up. But I'll tell you, we've talked for such a long time about how the mainstream media has lost credibility. Now, not only have they lost credibility, but they're being put on the hook for things that they've said, and the drumbeat of calling people fascists and calling people Nazis and talking about how it's the right that's divisive. And they try to paint Charlie Kirk as being divisive, when in point of fact, he had open discussion, and somebody called him a fascist. He says, now wait a minute, who's the fascist? Me, who's engaging you in conversation, or those people over there shouting at the top of their lungs not to come and talk to me, to shut me off? Who do you think are the fascists? And it got very quiet. The media, and you mentioned Victor Davis Hanson in China, the one thing that I saw, and I thought you were going to talk about this, was they did a kind of a play-by-play of the Chinese May Day parade, talking about how it was a show of strength, and how they showed all this military hardware off, and how it was pride in their country. When Donald Trump wanted to have a parade celebrating the Army's 250th anniversary, it was nothing but negative comments.
Yes.
Nothing but negative about the United States. It was nothing about the negativity about the ability of our armed forces to defend our country. And that may be as much as anything where he decided to call it the Department of War instead of the Department of Defense. He says, we don't want to be on defense. We want to be on offense.
Well, it's also interesting when you listen to and of course nowadays they're playing a lot of the film clips of Democrats specifically who made these outrageous statements about going to war with the Republicans or the conservatives or the MAGA people and whatnot. If you remember the most famous one, they bring a knife, we bring a gun. You've seen Hakeem Jeffries walking around with a baseball bat. You've seen the other black representative from Texas who walked around and and shook his cane at Donald Trump during the State of the Union. Al Green. So they have a history of making these outward gestures and outward comments that are dangerous in themselves, but also will give people food for thought and thinking, well, yeah, maybe I should take a gun and maybe I should do these kind of things. Maybe I should go after them. And look at the number of occurrences where Republicans have been attacked. Ron Paul, all right, Steve Scalise and the rest of the Republicans playing baseball. Donald Trump being shot at twice. Now Charlie Kirk. And there's probably many, many more that I can't recall. But I mean, so there is a history of demonic, Democrat, socialist, whatever radicals going after Republican conservatives.
Well, Joe Biden saying he was going to take Trump out behind the gym and beat the tar out of him.
Right.
Gavin Newsom saying, I'm just going to punch him in the face.
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot of that call for, a lot of that call for violence. Now, they would say, oh, well, that was just
Hyperbole.
Hyperbole.
Yes.
But remember when Donald Trump told the people to fight for democracy?
Yes.
And he was talking about fighting at the ballot box,
Right.
fighting, standing for the. But they are very, very good at duplicity. Okay, they are very good at do as I say, not as I do. Mm-hmm. And so you saw a lot of that, which led to this thing with Charlie Kirk. And I think it's very important that as we begin to form our ability to respond to this, is to tell the truth. Okay, tell the truth, because these liberals cannot stand the truth. Victimhood is their identity. Okay, and when you point out that they're really not a victim, that this one gal come up to Charlie Kirk and was talking about how much she hated the country. And he goes, well, are you going to leave? Well, no, I'm not going to leave. And he says, here's a country that's so great, even the people that hate it won't leave. They still want to stay here. And, of course, all the MAGA kids erupt in applause. But he speaks the truth, and he was smiling. He was laughing. Mm-hmm. He wasn't angry. He wasn't pointing fingers. He never advocated any violence that I ever saw. If somebody can show me that, I'll be glad to do that. But he was glad to point out things that they held up as great hallmarks, like DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But they've changed the language. Diversity really means conformity. Mm-hmm. Okay? Equity, if you ever read Animal Farm, equity means some animals are more equal than others. And inclusion means exclusion for those who oppose us. Okay? We want to include everybody. Well, what about white males? Well, they don't need it. They don't need to be included. Or white middle-aged males, I suppose. So they only want it. And so when Charlie would talk about DEI, they would accuse him of being racist. He was being racist when he did that. And I said, well, there's no W in DEI. That DEI only applies to certain people. Mm-hmm. And as we have gone along over the course of my lifetime, I have seen affirmative action. In fact, there have been calls now for affirmative action to go away because people are now getting hired on their merits. And again, these people in the revolution don't like meritocracy. They want you to be hired because of whatever intersectionality you have. If you're a black, female, transgendered, furry, lesbian, whatever, the more victimhood you have going for you, the higher you move up in the list. Does it matter whether you can do the job or not? In fact, didn't we just have an airplane crash where where the crew was one of this all-women crew, where they had picked the people to be on the crew just because they were women?
I think it was it in a military plane? I think it was in a military plane.
Was it in a military plane?
I think so, but I could be wrong, but memory serves me correct. It was a military aircraft that went down with 2 female pilots, and they both had those kind of situations.
The navigator, they were all put on because they were women, and that's okay. That's okay, but understand that I don't care your race, creed, color, national origin, whatever. All I care is, can you do the job? If I hire you as a truck driver, can Can you get it to the depot on time, and can you back the trailer up?
And can you speak English and read road signs?
Amen.
Yes, I mean,
Amen.
That is absolutely necessary in today's world. As we're finding out more and more every day, there are more and more of these drivers on the road that, number one, cannot speak English, all right, cannot read road signs, and yet they have a license. And you have to ask yourself, well, we know in some cases how they got it, because even here in Florida, there were some corrupt people that were selling CDL licenses to people that were not qualified.
Right.
Okay, and so on. So hopefully it costs them and whatnot. It's just unbelievable what's happened to a lot of the, I would call it like maybe sacred things in this country that, you don't cross that line, all right? And that is, how could you stoop so low that you're talking to someone who, number one, cannot speak English, cannot read a sign, and yet you say, hey, for $200, I'll give you the CDL license. How can you
Follow
do that?
the money?
I know, I understand that, but I mean, we talked about it. I was with a group Saturday morning. We talked about this kind of thing. And today, you almost have to shake your head constantly and say, where do these people come from? And yet, when you sit down and you analyze it, you look at the indoctrination, and there were some grade schools. There was a teacher, one of the teachers that was caught this weekend in a class of like 8 and 9-year-olds, showed the picture of actually Charlie Kirk being shot, and then told the students how bad of a person he was. Now, she has been fired, thank God.
Yes.
But I mean, how many of those teachers are around that it won't get reported?
Yeah,
or it won't get found out?
Are under the radar. And I saw somebody who pointed out, and there was little pinpricks around the United States of teachers who have been let go from the college level down to the elementary school level because of that kind of thing. And they said, if you didn't believe in homeschooling before, you should believe in homeschooling now.
Absolutely.
And I'll tell you, one of my great disappointments in Donald Trump at this point in my life is that during his first administration, he promised to get away, he promised to dissolve the Department of Education, and he didn't do it. He put in Betsy DeVos. Now he's got somebody else in there, and they have not dissolved the Department of Education, and I'm bitterly disappointed at that.
Well, you have to ask whether or not they're setting the framework for that to happen, because so much of the apparatus of the Department of Education has been in Washington, D.C. There may be, I'm picking a number, thousands of people that aren't necessary. They're there because they were a DEI hire or they were somebody's niece or nephew got hired. So you need to be able to dissolve yourself of those folks that are not necessary, and then they've got to put the apparatus out to all 50 states. Okay, you have to put the apparatus out there. The funding, they have to still continue to get some funding from the federal government for education. All right,
I'm not sure that's true, and I'll tell you why.
I think they will initially, because the states, I don't think financially, states that are so far in debt today, look at Chicago. Their school system is in debt millions and billions of dollars.
Some of those dollars are earmarked for federal programs.
Yeah.
And if the federal programs go away, the money to fund them also goes away. So it's a wash. You don't have to do this anymore, okay? It's how the states determine how much education do we want our kids to go through. And it will be up to the states at that point. Again, I think Donald Trump does a lot of 10th Amendment stuff that he doesn't couch in 10th Amendment stuff. Because as our dear friend Dale Flug, the publisher of the Heartland Herald, would always say, that education is not mentioned in the Constitution.
No.
So it's not in the Constitution. There's no reason for the federal government to be doing it. He has been doing things he's not a conservative, but he does conservative things. And one is to do away with departments, and the Department of Education should be the number one thing that they do away with. Now, in California, are they going to get a DE? You better believe they're going to get DEI education. In Florida, well, maybe not so much, and you're going to find people who pull kids out of school or just leave the state. And we've seen the flight already of people leaving the blue states to red states so they can be freer,
Well, I know one of the, if you will, one of the Christian schools here in town that I'm familiar with and whatnot, and we've spoken directly to the person that is like the second in command there. They're now at a point where their walls are bursting. They have to seriously, and are working on seriously considering an expansion, because they've got 400-plus students, all right, and they need more room in order to take on more people that they have requests from the parents for. And a large percentage of it, I believe, is due to the reimbursement that the state provides for alternative education.
Well, there are in the world, there are schools that call themselves Christian who are not Christian because they can't enforce Christian precepts because they take so much federal money. And there's a rule now in Florida that you can take, what is it, $7,000 a year?
$7,500.
$7,500,
I think.
that you can take that and spend it on any school or even homeschooling
Yes.
if you want.
Yes.
Okay? And so I think there can come a time to say, hey, look, on this date certain, the Department of Education will go away, this funding will go away, and these requirements, which we used to ask for, will also go away. Your state needs to make sure, if you want any or all of these to continue, you're going to have to do it yourself. Now, I will tell you that in a parallel case, there was a time when the Highway 27 went through Highlands County, but if you got pulled over for speeding, that money went to the state because they cited you on state statutes. So each of the communities and the county passed their own laws reinforcing the speed limit on the highway. So if you got pulled over for speeding on 27, they didn't charge you with a state statute. They charged you with a local statute. So the money would go to the locality. Okay? So in that same term, in those same terms, I think that there can come a time when they can say, look, we are doing away with all of this federal stuff. Now, if you want, as a state, if you wanted, it's the same as Roe v. Wade. When Roe v. Wade went away, it didn't make abortion legal. It turned it back over to the states.
Right.
And so I think that it's time to turn education back over to the states and let the people decide, what do they want?
Right.
What do they want?
Right, absolutely. No, I agree, but I do think that in the end, the Department of Education will be dissolved. I think it's taking time because I believe they have to lay the groundwork and make sure that all of the issues that are involved in this, I don't think it's as simple as let's just lock the door and send everybody home. I don't think it's quite that simple. They've got these programs have been in existence for 10, 20, 30 years. So now some way you have to figure, are we going to pull these back, and what's going to be the next evolution of this situation? All right, and how do we handle that? So you want to do it, but you have to do it in a way that is meaningful and correct, and that doesn't come back to bite you in the end.
Well,
that's the thing.
In real life, if you go to the Barry Foster department store and you're used to buying stuff at the Barry Foster department store, and all of a sudden they come and in the front windows are big clearance, going out of business sale. Say, if you want to buy any of this stuff, you better buy it now. Because guess what? As of this date certain, as of September 1st, whatever, we're not going to be here anymore. The doors are going to be locked. So it's time, I think, for and he has control, Donald Trump has control over federal agencies, and it's time for him to say, look, as of October 1st of next year, these doors are going to be closed. So you better decide what programs you want to do and what programs you don't want to do, because pretty soon the mandate's going to be gone and the money is going to be gone.
That'll be the big thing. Of course, right now, as we sit here today, I think at the end of this month, the end of September, the 1st of October, all right, there is a looming federal shutdown because of the budget impact. The Democrats adamantly vehement that they're not going to vote for it, okay, because the Republicans haven't given us enough, okay, that we can vote for this. So it'll be interesting to see who blinks. I hope if the Democrats want to shut it down, I hope they let them shut it down. I really do. Let them shut it down and let them suffer the flack for it, okay, and whatnot, because that, to me, would be easy enough to do.
And I hope that the people who have this kind of things, that we talked about this yesterday, people do screenshots of things and save things. I hope they have the quotes from Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, AOC, some of these other people. When the Democrats shut down the government, why, this is a great thing. This is a good time to look for your dreams.
Amen.
This is a good time for federal employees, because federal employees always get paid.
Yes, they do.
They may not get paid on time, but ultimately they're going to get that money.
They're going to get all their back pay.
They'll get all their back pay.
Yes.
So I think it's time that they begin to litter, just like the internet now is littered with Charlie Kirk clips. They litter it with clips from these people talking about what a great thing that the government shutdown is.
Nancy Pelosi was the one that made those kind of
Yes,
statements that
yes.
you could go out and seek what was inside of you all along, and now you have the opportunity to go out there and do it. And by the way, unemployment pay isn't such a bad thing. Okay, so this is you're right. This is where it's going to ultimately go. But I do not want to see the Republicans sit there and say to the Democrats, "Oh, you wanted $13 billion for this program? Sure, here it is." No. If you're serious about cutting spending, you have to start with the budget. And you have to say, no is the answer. We've spent what we're going to spend. We're not going to do it anymore.
And it's going to be up to us, as part of this great awakening, coming together to stand up and tell our legislators, you stand for, if you expect my vote, and I think it's time for us to begin looking for candidates, because it's amazing how malleable and friendly legislators become when they think that somebody's going to be running for their office, okay? Because the left can't stand strength. They can't stand success. They can't stand rationality. They eschew things like self-reliance and personal responsibility and meritocracy. That's why they originally started going after the Boy Scouts, because in Boy Scouts, you learned how to be self-reliant, okay? That's why they went after the churches. Now, when the coronavirus, the pandemic was on, the marijuana dispensaries stayed open. The bars stayed open, but the churches had to be closed, and you couldn't sing because it would be spreading. I mean, it was very obvious what they were doing. And in hindsight, is 20/20 vision. If you can't see it now, let's sit down and talk about this. It's time for us to begin teaching our kids the idea of self-reliance. I mean, every school, all the boys should be in home ec for a semester. All the girls should be in shop for a semester. I mean, the girls should be learning about how you work on your car, how to change a tire, for crying out loud. I mean, we've seen these videos, and they're simultaneously funny and pathetic, that they showed this girl operating a hand-operated can opener, opening this big jar of peanuts. And the kids were sitting there in abject astonishment that she was able to use this device to unhook undo the lid on this can. We've seen I saw where they had these internet influencers on, and they asked him to name one continent. She says, Berlin? No. United States? No. And she's going, I don't know. And the other goes, you broke her. Yeah, she couldn't name one. I was trying last night to name all 7 of them, and I got 6 out of the 7. But at any rate, the simplest questions, things that we should know. I mean, out of the 7 continents, you should be able to say North America, for crying out loud, or Antarctica. I mean, in South America, I mean, you should be able to name at least some Asia. You should be able to name one of the continents. I mean, even if you sat around and watched Jeopardy all day, you'd get some of this information.
Well, if you see a lot of the man-in-the-street interviews over the course of time, where they come up and say to somebody, who is your senator? Can you name one of your senators? And they can't.
No.
They cannot name one of their senators. Okay? I mean, there's only 2. You only have 2 in the state you live in, all right? But they could not even name one of their 2 senators.
Name one of your city council members.
I know. I mean, it's just like holy cow, folks, where are you at? And these are no doubt people that supposedly, and this is what always got me with the Charlie Kirk interviews, these kids would come up and think they were Albert Einstein because they went to college. Charlie, you never went to college, so you don't know anything. But I know everything because I've been educated here for 4 years or 3 years, whatever. He's not losing any time, all right? But, I mean, so it was obvious that, these kids, when they get in there, number one, they go in there and they may not have any knowledge, but they become so full of themselves because they are being so-called educated by these professors, but you wonder, what education do they really get?
Oh, they've been told you're special. There's nobody like you. That and everybody gets a trophy. And it is. In the Communist Manifesto, Marx calls for the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why. And we've talked about this for a while. The Chinese are masters at this. We are in unrestricted warfare. They want to destroy everything. They want to destroy the nuclear family. And you find that many of these criminals grew up in a family without a father. And who separated the father from the family? Lyndon Baines Johnson.
Yes.
When they would give money to women who were not married. Okay, so it was in their. They were very proud of being able to have multiple children by multiple fathers, and they literally destroyed the nuclear family in the black community, and they would destroy it in every other community if they thought they could.
Yes. Yes.
Some cultures, Hispanic culture, for one, is absolutely dedicated to the family. The Asian culture is dedicated to the family.
And dedicated to education, by the way.
Yes.
I mean, true education.
The highest number of billionaires per capita is in the Asian community.
And in this country, the highest earning group in this country per capita, based on their economic situation, is the Indians.
Yes.
All right, the Indians come to this country.
You mean Indians, Pakistani
yes,
Indians.
Right.
Yes.
When they come to this country, all right, they get into, number one, they buy up a lot of motels, a lot, because I've stayed at many of them, okay? Some, they put money back into the facility, some they don't. But that's one of their entry points into this country, all right? And there's other businesses they do the same thing with, but per capita, they are the largest income earners in the country.
Yeah.
And whatnot. So it's there, but it's there for the taking. But it's you have to put in the time, effort, and money in order to make it happen in some cases.
Yeah, well, it's up to us. It's up to us to stand strong, because I'm going to continue to say this, because we are at the turning point, and the pendulum is swinging back, and it's time for us to step into the breach. Now, we've gotten some from Turning Point, but I think, and this happened to us, and you were there, you were part of it, about a decade and a half ago, when Rick Santori was on the floor of the Chicago Board of Trade, and he was talking about these taxes, and he said, I don't understand why people across this country aren't starting their own tea parties, and, tea being taxed enough already, and getting together and standing against some of the things that this government is doing. And from this offhand comment came the Highlands and a number of other tea parties. They branched out and become other things now. They're other things now. They are not only tea parties, they're 912 groups, and they're patriot groups, and they're other.
I think there's just MAGA groups today, too.
MAGA groups.
MAGA groups, yes, absolutely. And so on. You're right. I mean, that was, and for us, the impetus for that was Obamacare.
Yes.
That's what, if you remember, and were you at that big meeting we had down in Lake Placid?
Yes.
At that facility down there? My gosh, that was overflow. People were standing outside the building, so it was reported to be upwards of 500 or 600 people were at that meeting.
It was not a seat. In fact,
No.
I had called ahead of time,
Yeah.
and I said to the people who were organizing it, I said, there is going to be a table for the media, right? And they said, yeah, there's going to be a table for the media. I said, yeah, because I want to cover this. And at the time, I was the news director for the Highlands Radio Group. And I said, well, I want to make sure, and I want to make sure that we can hear what's being said, all right? I want to make sure we can hear what's being said, and that I have plenty of time to take copious and accurate notes. So they put us on the stage behind the speakers, but we could hear. I mean, the people who were speaking were in front of us, but the speakers were over top of our heads, so we could hear it. And so, yes, it was packed.
Yes, it was. And I mean, that was the impetus in Highlands County for the Highlands County Tea Party. And that's what got us started, was Obamacare and our fight against it, all right? And that's why we had that rally and so on. So it, and I will say this, and because I've been with the Highlands Tea Party for many, many years, okay? And I think we've done a lot. I think we've done a lot of good in the community.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've educated an awful lot of people. I learned an awful lot from the people that we've had come and speak about a number of subject matters and so on. And I think it's been a valuable lesson for a lot of people, and it continues to be today. And so, if you'd be interested in joining, join us, because you might get a little education yourself.
There's no dues. You just show up most Tuesday nights at the Vietnam Veterans Hall, 33565 Grand Prix Drive, which is on the road there between Murphy and the Walmart in Sebring. We're about a half a mile, quarter mile in, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
We're right next to the St. John's Methodist Church. I will tell you that coming up on the 23rd, it's going to be an open house. We're going to have a lot of information to give away so you can become informed. You know, books like the 5,000 Year Leap. We're going to have a lot of pamphlets to give away, things that you can take and learn, so that when you when you talk, you can tell the truth, and you can learn to defend the faith and learn to defend the country, and learn how to push back in a very cordial way.
Yes, and in spite of everything that's happened, it's where do we go from here? What do we do? All right, how do we engage more people? And as I listened to my educator, Victor Davis Hanson, and what he said this weekend, he said, you have to get out and vote and get as many people as you can to vote. And Scott, I mentioned Scott Pressler earlier, but I didn't get to finish the story. What he did this week, starting, I guess, this weekend or after the Charlie Kirk assassination, he now has gone online and captured all of these people that made these comments and has forwarded it to somebody that may be able to do something about it for that person.
Yes.
So, I mean, if you want to call it turning them in, call it what you want. But, I mean, what he's trying to do is expose these people for who they really are. All right, you may know somebody, but you didn't know how really rabid they were, but now you'll see their visual comments being made.
It is time to push back, and especially push back on people who are influencing young minds, like
Amen.
Teachers.
Amen.
Okay, and it's time for us to begin to stand for the faith, and stand for the country, stand for self-determination, and that's why I say if you come to the September 23rd meeting, I'm going to try to bring copies of the Constitution, and John has done a great job in booking guests in, and we're going to have our own program. We had one a little bit earlier, was our first one, and we're going to do one there live as well.
Do I book us in?
Yes.
I book us in.
You booked us in. And by the way, I do want to take a moment to tell you about our good friends over at Strangely Warmed Coffee. Some of the best coffee on the face of the earth. It is roasted right here in Highlands County from countries around the world. There's Colombia, and there's Peru, and there's Nicaragua, and there's Kenya. He gets coffee from all over. In fact, he's just had to buy a brand new, larger roaster to make more coffee. And I said, I saw him the other day. I said, Steve, is that paying off? He goes, that thing's running all the time. He said he had changed the venting on it, But it is probably the best smelling store in all of Highlands County.
Yep.
You walk in there and, man, it smells good in here.
Anything update to report on the locally grown coffee beans?
He is working, and if you want to listen to the Strangely Warmed Coffee show I did with Steve, they are looking to do growing here, and he's working on it. Mm-hmm. And coming up later next month, there's going to be someone in town surveying sites, so we'll let you know. And I told him, I said, I wouldn't mind having a couple of plants myself. Mm-hmm. I'd be glad to harvest those cherries. They call them cherries. I'd be glad to harvest those cherries and make my own coffee.
There you go. Yep.
So, but it's 180 steps off the circle. Go to strangelywarmedcoffee.com, and I think it's called the Strangely Warmed Coffee Roastery in Sebring. But it's worth going there. So again, John, I really appreciate you, and I think this may be akin to the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, which started World War I. I think this is going to be the start, I hope, and we'll see how long at first blush, it looks like this is going to be part of the Great Awakening.
I think so, and it appears that, like we said earlier, that the Charlie Kirk's widow certainly is standing very tall at this point in time, which is just an amazing story in itself, and so on. And I think with her leadership, and I assume that what you said earlier, that he has groomed some people within his 300 employees, that someone that could step into the breach and start to become a spokesperson. Whether that person will ever be able to have the innate education and knowledge that Charlie carried around in his head and was able to speak about, I don't know that there's anybody or very few people in this world that could do that, but hopefully he's got someone who can step in and start to become the spokesperson for the Turning Point USA and keep it going. Absolutely.
Well, we hope you'll continue to listen to the Barry Foster Show, also the Turning Point podcast, Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, Victor Davis Hanson, and others, and Glenn Beck and some of the others. Please, stay tuned, stay informed. You've been listening to the latest edition of the Barry Foster Show, recorded at the Ridge Florist Studios, located in the City of Charm, beautiful downtown Avon Park. If you have any thoughts, ideas, or suggestions for the program, you can put them on the comments below or send us an email at thebarryfostershow@gmail.com. Check out our YouTube page here. We'll be putting up new programming on a regular basis. And please subscribe to our YouTube page and join our pages of the Barry Foster Show on Facebook and Instagram. As we continue to look for truth, justice, and the American way, this is Barry Foster and John Larsen, and we'll see you next time.